Let me just say, I am pleased to welcome you to the Chesapeake Bay Executive Council Annual Meeting. To my colleagues who are here with us today, Governor Larry Hogan, Governor Glenn Youngkin, and State Senator Sarah Elfreth, thank you for joining us today, and thank you so much for all of your continued leadership. I'd also like to thank the state secretaries and directors of the Environment, Natural Resources, and Agriculture who are representing their jurisdictions today. I'll begin today's meeting by asking Dr. Candace Boyd, Director of the Chesapeake Bay Program, to present a progress update on the Chesapeake Bay and the watershed. Dr. Boyd took on enormous responsibility of directing the program just 4 short months ago. And with her impressive scientific background and years of dedicated federal service, she's hit the ground running and she hasn't let up yet. Dr. Boyd served at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the National Science Foundation and has proven her ability to get things done. Her passion for science, students, and STEM is unwavering, and she is a champion of DEI, DEIA, and environmental justice, 2 of the highest priorities of this administration. Dr. Boyd, thank you for your outstanding service and your public leadership. Please welcome Dr. Boyd.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Administrator Regan, for the introduction. As noted, I am Dr. Candace Boyd, Director of EPA's Chesapeake Bay Program Office. I want to start by thanking each and every one of you for coming today, as well as your participation in the Executive Council. Today, I am going to give our annual State of the Program, which will be a brief presentation about where the partnership stands and where we're headed. I've been in this position, as Administrator Regan has said, for 124 days, and I've spent much of that time traveling across the watershed to meet partners, celebrate their successes, and listen to their challenges. While I'm amazed by a lot of what I'm learning, what most impresses me are the partnerships across this vast watershed. Partnerships with federal agencies, partnerships with academic and research communities, partnerships with nonprofits, and partnerships with all that live, work, and recreate in the watershed. My desire as the director is to continually build on our core values of science and restoration while strengthening all of these important partnerships. So before I get into this year's outlook, I wanted to acknowledge how far we've come over the past 39 years. The Chesapeake Bay Program was formed in 1983, and when you stop to compare pollution reductions from 1985 until now, it is clear that so many positive changes have been made despite the dramatic increase in population and emerging threats, such as climate change, that make it more difficult to manage pollution. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge and celebrate this. Our partnership is studied and replicated throughout the entire world due to our successes, and we are considered the gold standard. It is because of this approach that we've been able to break so much ground in reducing pollution. The images on this slide show some of these successes. Successes in conserving lands. Successes in opening up new sites for the public to access the water. Successes in ensuring our schools are green and sustainable. And successes in opening up our streams for fish to pass through. And most importantly, successes to make sure the habitat for those fish remains healthy. Early on in this role, I heard from our partners about their experience with our modeling tools, specifically the Chesapeake Assessment Scenario Tool, also known as CAST. CAST is a part of our critical suite of modeling tools that allow state and local jurisdictions to simulate what conservation practices will help reduce the amount of pollution needed to meet their goals in their watershed implementation plans, also known as the WIP. CAST is a part of our adaptive management system. When we enhance the model with new data and more accurate assessments of conservation practices, it can impact estimated pollution reductions. But the fact of the matter is, we need to make this tool as accurate as possible so we can make the most informed decisions about how we carry out our restoration planning strategies. I've also learned about partnerships and the importance of monitoring throughout the entire watershed. Monitoring is necessary to ensure the tools that we use to evaluate the impacts and plan for future restoration strategies are the most accurate that they can be, meaning that we need to invest in high-quality monitoring capabilities across the entire watershed to better understand pollution impacts and how to address them. In many ways, we've greatly improved the data that we have about the Bay watershed. Released just this year is the very high resolution land use and land cover data that will provide us with more detailed information than ever before about how land in the region is being used, and this will help us refine our restoration targets. At the Chesapeake Bay program, we know that science and restoration go hand in hand. However, this past year, our results have been mixed. The blue crab population took a big hit in 2022, decreasing 39% from 158 million to 97 million. Oysters, on the other hand, are going strong. In the fall of 2021, we had one of the best wild oyster seasons in nearly 35 years. And yet, when you look at our water quality, again, we show mixed results. The percent of the overall bay meeting water quality standards has been decreasing since 2017. But in many of our tributaries throughout the watershed, the water quality has increased. So, to reach a fully restored Chesapeake Bay, we need to continue working together. From our local government members to our federal and state government partners to our nonprofit allies and advocates, it is up to all of us to bring more voices to the table and work more efficiently and effectively together for a restored bay. It is critical for us to engage those throughout the watershed that have been historically left out of this conversation. There are over 18 million people in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and all of us deserve access to clean water, no matter where we live, no matter what we do for a living, and no matter what our background is. So recently, our partnership held a blue crab workshop that brought together top researchers and scientists to talk about the decreasing blue crab population. But more importantly, we have heard what all of our partners have said. And as a result, both EPA and NOAA are moving forward together with full support of the blue crab stock assessment. This year, we have received unprecedented support from the administration and from Congress through the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act, as well as other federal legislation. Many of our state and local partners have been able to use these new funding sources to bolster their increased investments in the Bay restoration efforts. This includes the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, who has been able to invest funding from the American Rescue Plan Act to assist their farmers in helping to keep their local waters healthy, which in turn helps restore the Chesapeake Bay. So today, I am privileged to announce the release of our annual report, the Bay Barometer. And this is where I need some audience participation, so pull out your cell phones, take a look at this QR code, and snap it with your phone. All right, and yes, everybody up here too. All right, and everybody virtually too. Because this year, the Bay Barometer is 100% electronic. So by clicking on this QR code, you will receive the latest Bay Barometer directly to your email. This report includes an update on 9 outcomes of the Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement that were updated this year, as well as an overview of various achievements made by the partnership. So again, especially to our virtual partners today, using this QR code, see here, if you click on it and you use your phone, you will be able to get a copy of the 100% electronic Bay Barometer directly to your email. So finally, I'd like to thank each and every member of the Chesapeake Bay program staff. This is an incredibly passionate group of experts and enthusiasts, scientists and specialists who all work together to restore the Chesapeake Bay watershed. None of what you see or hear today would be possible without their combined hard work, and we should applaud them for their efforts. Because, yes, please do. So if you take nothing else from my presentation and speech today, it is that we are one Chesapeake. Thank you. And now, it is my esteemed privilege to introduce to you Ann Swanson, who is the Executive Director of the Chesapeake Bay Commission, and after 35 years of service, will be retiring later this year. And so if I can take a moment of personal privilege, when I started this position 124 days ago, Ann was the very first person that reached out to me and the very first person that I met. And she gave me one piece of advice. And she said, Candace, those who do well in this position, remember always that this is a partnership. And it is because of Ann's unwavering effort that this partnership has continued to thrive for nearly 40 years. So I present to you, Ann Swanson.
Okay. Get myself situated here. Okay, so first of all, Administrator Reagan and Governor Hogan, Governor Youngkin, of course, Senator Sarah Elfreth, and all of you here on the podium and here in the audience, let me just tell you, it's an incredible honor to be here. It's an incredible honor to be a part of the Bay program. And so I just want to start there. The other thing that I want to reflect on is that Candace has mentioned that she's been here 100 days or 124 days. And so I just want to tell you that I've been here 14,263 days. So what I want to tell you is that if there is something that bothers you, you can speak to me, because I certainly witnessed it as it occurred. So anyway, the other thing is I want to just say that this really has been my dream job with the Chesapeake Bay Commission. It gave me the opportunity to work collaboratively with every sector and both parties. It allowed me to pursue policies and funding and to really make our communities sustainable, all the while keeping the eye on the prize, which in this case is the ecological health of the Chesapeake Bay, its watershed, its living resources. So now I've been challenged in just a few minutes to tell you what I think happened and what needs to happen, and in 10 minutes you can't possibly cover it all. So I'm gonna do my best. The other thing is, most of you know that as a speaker, I love to be in command of my own clicker, and I am not. So I'm going to have to pause and say next, but hopefully this will work out. So without further ado, just as the presentation is called, looking back, looking forward, we're going to take a few minutes to look back and to just see what happened, or at least to see some of the good that happened, because ultimately I'm an optimist, I'm also a realist, and so let's take a look. So first of all, I started in 1983 with the Bay region. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically look at this from the lens of the 1980s to the 2000s current. Bottom line here is water quality is improving. Have we met all our water quality standards? No, we're at 29%. But nonetheless, it is improving whether you look at it through the modeling eyes or monitoring. Let me pause there and say something. There is nowhere in the world that an estuary has the level of detail, the level of science that we have. They don't have our models and they don't have our monitoring. Can our models be better? Yes. Can our monitoring be better? Yes, it always can. And that's the signature of our program. Over those 14,000 days that I worked here, I witnessed the Bay program always wanting to improve. So let's take a look at this. At the end of the day, what you can see, and I think you can hear me even if I, thank you. What you can see is we have made substantial progress. We have cut the nitrogen loads by 1/3, and this is in modeling. But take a look at the monitoring. In the private meeting, one person referred to it as the report card. And at the end of the day, the monitoring shows downward trends. Now, if I use more current data, you will see that some of these are disturbingly flipping. Rivers in each of your jurisdictions are turning around. And so you need to make sure that those arrows, those trends continue to be down. Those arrows don't mean you're at the goal line. What they mean is you're heading things in the right direction. Oh, and I want to go back, just one thing. I want to say something. When I had really low days, I would say to my husband, you know what my tombstone is going to say? It's going to say, she died holding the line. But what I want to point out here is I came here in '83, so the line was here. So my tombstone will not read, she died holding the line, because you have brought it down. But again, you need to do more. Next. Okay, the other thing I want to point out is land protection. No other large-scale estuary has a ratio of land to water like the Chesapeake. The Chesapeake has a 14-to-1 land-to-water ratio, and that means what you do on the land is inextricably linked to the water, which means the protection of the land is critical. And of course, it's for other reasons too. Outdoor recreation is booming in this country. Our wildlife needs it, but it also means improved water quality if you're protecting those forests and wetlands. And at the end of the day, what you can see here is we are 70% towards our goal. We have 9.2 million acres in this 41 million acre watershed preserved. And what that means is that we are on the right path. Right now, we're at about 23% of the watershed protected. The nation has adopted a 30% protection, and we just might be the region that can show them that we can do it here in the Chesapeake. Next. The last piece of progress I want to show you is this. Bottom line, when I got here in 1983, the population was here. Now the population is here. In the time that we cut the pollution load by 1/3, the population grew by 1/2. But that's not the only population to worry about, and I'm going to get more to that later. The other population to worry about is livestock. And livestock has increased by 1/3 in the watershed just in the time I got here. So now let me switch to the future in my last remaining moments. What do we do? Not beyond 2025. That's not the issue. The issue is the next 3 years. The issue is how close can you get to prove not only the region, the nation, and the world that if you set a really difficult goal, one that almost seems not doable, that you can get damn close. And that's the challenge now. So let me, my last remaining minutes, I'm just going to show you a few things that I think are critical. The first is, this is the modeled loads for nitrogen. Bottom line, these colors, if you look here at the this is wastewater. We made enormous progress. That's where most of the progress lies. But the other is, never forget this. which is air. And that also, we made enormous strides in terms of air. Those two areas, we made those strides because we made them based on regulation, we made them based on investment, and we made them based on accountability. Never lose those three tools in your toolbox. But the other thing is, now take a look here. Where's the opportunity? The opportunity is absolutely in agriculture. Agriculture provides us the cheapest, best, most efficient way to capture that pollutant load. And fortunately, 1/3 of our watershed, 25% of our watershed is in agriculture. The farmers have been enormously supportive, and with the right, very clear guidance, they can do a lot more. What do I mean by like clear guidance? I mean things like communicating our expectations. What do we want? And I'll cover more of that, the other. The other is, I want every leader here to keep your eye on stormwater, because stormwater is going the wrong direction. It has grown regardless of our efforts. And so that load really needs help. And these two areas, at the end of the day, you know, it's about technical assistance, it's about targeting, it's about outreach strategies. So let's talk about targeting for a moment. The resources in the Chesapeake Bay related to just knowing what's on the land, what's the land cover, is nothing short of a miracle. It really is. It used to be that the resolution was this. Now the resolution is this, where you can truly see things. What does that mean? This was 30 meters squared. This is 1 meter squared. I'm trained as a forest ecologist. 1 meter is a bush. I mean, you know, you can really see things in extraordinary detail. And so the kind of detail we have now is 900 times more than it used to be. We not only can see better what is on the landscape, but we can see where the water is flowing and therefore make our most strategic BMP choices. We need to essentially practice precision conservation, and we need to get this to our local governments and our local decision makers so they can use it. Next. The next one is agriculture. And more specifically, I want to focus on livestock. And I want to go here just because what you saw by the last slide is you can target. There are certain areas in the watershed that have extremely concentrated livestock populations. For example, one county in Pennsylvania, Lancaster, has more dairy than all of Maryland and 25% more than Virginia. That's one county. And so in that sense, if you target that training, that workforce development, that outreach and education, the cost share, it can be exceedingly meaningful, and you can get close to that goal. The other thing I want to just show you is these are my favorite Petri dishes. They're absolutely my most favorite Petri dishes, and the reason is this actually illustrates a very, very focused area in the Pogue River in Virginia, where it's a small river, it's called a run, the Pogue Run, and it's near Staunton. And basically all the landowners decided, let's stay right here, let's all exclude the livestock from the streams. Well, originally, the community, this is called community forming units, fecal coliform, just think about it that way. And in the beginning, it was 3,800. And after they were done excluding the livestock, it was 25. The water quality standard for the region is 10 times that at 235. So geographic focus matters. Next. So does what animal you're focusing on. This graph just, to me, says a lot. This is 1985, and this is 2025. And what color has the biggest bar? And clearly, if you can't read it, it's broilers, it's poultry, which means you can also really focus, again, your technical assistance, your financial support, your cost share, your outreach and education, and if you need to, your regulation in that area, because there are real opportunities there, but they have to be used in combination. The regulation, the technical assistance and outreach, et cetera. Next. Let me show you why you need to do that. This happens to be, and for some reason the bars are not showing up on this, but please know underneath here are yellow bars. Right, Garrett? You can see that. Okay. So anyway, fortunately, I was smart enough to put this arrow. And what this is the progress between 85 and 2021 for wastewater. We knew to control wastewater. We knew to fund wastewater. We knew to make it accountable. But think about this. Livestock produce 10 times the volume of excrement compared to the total human population, and many more times the nutrients, which means we need to focus there, just the way we knew to focus on wastewater. Next. Okay, trees. You have to protect the trees. The trees are the ultimate cleanser for the water. And a shrub is not a tree. So when they produce policies that say for every tree you take down, you can replace it with three shrubs, please question that logic. Please question that. Because it's simply not true. It's not true for carbon sequestration to help with climate change. It is not true for water quality, and it's not true for the warbler that's migrating. Now look at this chart. This chart says everything. The same trees on an acre, you're going to get 750 gallons of runoff. You convert that to pavement, it's 27,000. There are consequences for your decision. Watch the trees, support the trees. Next. And finally, in my last slide, is really about this partnership. This partnership is about negotiation. You've made decisions based on science. As policymakers and politicians, more importantly, that is not easy. But it's the science that continues to drive us, continue to inform us, and tell us when we've been wrong and we need to adjust. Never abandon that. Always invest in it. And the idea to invest even more in monitoring, in the truth, that's important. It's very important. The other thing, and I want to leave you here, is you have voices that are extremely unique. They're much more unique, and I mean no disrespect to all of you, but than these voices. And the reason is because when you speak, people jump. You're the commanders in chief. And so if you speak strongly for Chesapeake Bay, there are thousands that will respond to you. And there will thousands that will have passion for your impatience if you are impatient and you want more. And for the Chesapeake, which is a world resource, you have to want more. So that's really where I want to leave you. I think it's more than support. It's really about cherishing. Thank you.
That round of applause was definitely well-deserved. And on behalf of the Chesapeake Executive Council and the United States Environmental Protection Agency, let me just say I'm delighted to convey my congratulations to your service. Boy, is the Chesapeake Bay going to miss this warrior. Thank you so much for your enthusiasm, your leadership, the intellectual capacity that you've given us for so long. And it's an honor, it's a privilege. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And as Ann is very well aware, we are letting her get out the door, but we are not letting her get away. So we know her phone number, we know her email address, and we'll continue to rely heavily on your expertise. Thank you. Well, we've had an incredibly productive day today, and earlier I sat down with the Executive Council and their top advisors for a really good and honest conversation about what's next for the Chesapeake Bay program. While we come from different states and agencies with varying concerns and a wide range of expectations, we ultimately report back to you and the 18 million people who live in the 64,000 square mile Chesapeake watershed that, of course, we share a common goal: to restore and protect the Bay and its watershed for all residents, and for future generations. This morning during the Executive Council meeting, we agreed to ask our Principals Staff Committee to rethink how we accelerate our work through 2025 and beyond. We need a clear path forward that prioritizes and outlines next steps for achieving our goals. We have asked the committee to present a plan by next year's Executive Council meeting to address how we will sustain and build on our partnership's restoration efforts in both the long and short terms. We know that our goals are ambitious, but we've all agreed, every single person at this table has agreed, we are up for the challenge. Thanks to the leadership of President Biden, Vice President Harris, and partners in Congress, with unprecedented funding from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the American Rescue Plan, we can push further and faster than we ever have before. Funding from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law increases EPA's Chesapeake Bay program by $90 million annual appropriation by an additional $47 million per year for 5 years. That's an extra $238 million over 5 years that will go directly to improving traditional, green, and nature-based infrastructure and helping communities invest more into making the Chesapeake Bay and its watershed an even greater place for all. I have the pleasure of representing all the federal agencies at this council and want to call out the efforts of so many agencies that make up a whole of government. We're stronger together than we are alone, and we're taking a whole of a government approach to this work because that's what President Biden has asked us to do. From engaging with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to address the decline in the blue crab populations in the Bay, to the significant contributions from the United States Department of Agriculture. We're on farms, in meetings, and in state capitals where there is Bay work, there is a federal partner. I also want to thank the USDA for providing extensive financial and technical assistance to farmers and ranchers in the watershed. Over the past decade, the National Resources Conservation Service, a USDA agency, has invested more than $1 billion, billion with a B, in the Chesapeake Bay watershed for voluntary conservation efforts that improve the quality of our local streams and the Bay. This spring, USDA also announced the new Chesapeake Bay States Partnership Initiative, which adds an additional $22.5 million investment to help farmers boost water quality improvements in the watershed. EPA has also been in the field talking with farmers to understand what they need to further conservation efforts. Together, EPA and USDA are working to align our funding with state cost share programs. And we're convening a joint federal task force to ensure farmers get the credit they deserve for voluntary practices that improve water quality. I'm also thankful for the partner jurisdictions that have made significant strides to restore the Bay and its watershed. Both the District of Columbia and West Virginia are on track for meeting their pollution reduction targets by 2025. And Virginia and Pennsylvania have both invested American Rescue Plan funds in related efforts. I am certain that with all of the support and our continued collaboration, we will build on the work to make the Chesapeake Bay and its watershed a safer, healthier, cleaner place for all. And with that, I'd like to turn things over to my good friend, Governor Hogan. Thank you all again.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you, Administrator Regan, for your leadership, and thank you for convening us today. I want to thank Ann Swanson for not only for her presentation, but for her outstanding leadership on all of these issues throughout her entire career. 35 years is a long time. I feel like 8 years was enough for me to put in, but 35 years with Chesapeake Bay Commission. So thank you very much. With 2025 quickly approaching, this discussion really is very relevant, and it's important that we achieve our goals for the near term while still keeping our eye on the long term. It's also important that we engage in a variety of stakeholders in this process. And I see so many of them sitting in the audience today, everybody not just up on the stage, but so many people. We've engaged stakeholders in the process through broader outreach to diverse communities by ensuring access to outdoor recreation and experiences that inspire stewardship. Our recent announcement with the Chesapeake Conservancy, Blacks of the Chesapeake and the City of Annapolis, that we're protecting a historically significant waterfront property in Anne Arundel County, is a great example of that. Carr's Beach was a popular Chesapeake Bay resort and concert venue for African American community members during the period of racial segregation. And now through our collective efforts, Marylanders and visitors from around the world, that important piece of history will be preserved. Later this week, we'll be making a really exciting announcement along the Susquehanna, which will further our land conservation efforts and support our outdoor recreation economy. To further these goals and get more projects like this done, in Maryland, we established an Office of Outdoor Recreation. We continue to support on-the-job training and workforce development for youth and veterans through our Department of Natural Resources Conservation Corps programs, and we continue to fully fund important programs like Program Open Space and the Chesapeake and Atlantic Coastal Bays Trust Fund. In fact, in July, we announced that $18.8 million would go to 22 different ecological restoration projects in 77 unique sites across Maryland. These projects alone will remove over 41,000 pounds of nitrogen, 4,300 pounds of phosphorus, and nearly 8,000 tons of suspended solids. I want to applaud the Pennsylvania legislature for the passage of their fertilizer bill after 12 years of effort, and on the enactment of the historic Clean Streams Fund, which is an historic step in the right direction. Few initiatives, some new initiatives such as the Conservation Finance Act will help provide even greater opportunities for Maryland and Pennsylvania to work together and maximize investment of our shared goals. And I want to encourage all of the Bay jurisdictions to continue working closely with our agricultural community to ensure adequate technical resources and financial assistance programs. And I want to emphasize Maryland's commitment to fully acknowledging and facing our restoration challenges head on, like those we've been facing at our largest wastewater treatment plants. This has underscored the importance of making sure that our restoration investments are well maintained and continue to perform as designed throughout their lifespan. It has also shown the importance of having a trained and professional workforce to care for our restoration investments and the critical nature of head-to-toe compliance checks. The good news is that our wastewater treatment plants have shown that they can perform efficiently and actually do better than what's required in their permits, but they need the trained professional workforce in place to operate the plants efficiently. Looking beyond 2025, accelerating innovations in financing and restoration approaches will be critical to provide new restoration tools in our toolkit. Maryland's $25 million commitment to solving Conowingo pollution across jurisdictional boundaries using a pay-for-performance and conservation financing is another example of how we're accelerating innovation. We appreciate all the jurisdictional collaboration and partnerships that we're making, that are making Conowingo successful. And with more precipitation and runoff and more extreme weather events and the rising seas associated with climate change, we will also need to work harder in the future to maintain our restoration progress and to promote a resilient bay that is surrounded by resilient and safe farms and communities. Looking ahead, we must continually strive to be good stewards in order to leave our environment better than when we found it, while creating economic prosperity for all. Thank you.
We'll now turn it over to Governor Youngkin.
Thank you very much, and thank you for welcoming to this very important gathering. I too would first like to start with a deep word of thank you to Ann. This past year, you have worked tirelessly to help the Commonwealth of Virginia improve, and I can't imagine what the previous 34 years were like. And so thank you for your commitment. I'm a homegrown Virginia boy, not just in Virginia, but in Virginia Beach. And the Chesapeake Bay means an extraordinary amount to me. I grew up on it, and I want to make sure that future generations can enjoy the exact same access to what is one of the most important natural assets in the world. When I was inaugurated as governor in January, it became clear to me that Virginia was not on track to meet its 2025 goals by 2025. And that was a difficult recognition. I think we have a clear commitment to meet those goals. Unfortunately, we won't meet them by 2025. We've made considerable progress on many of them. But unfortunately, I inherited a plan that didn't have Virginia on a path to meet them all on time. We had some unrealistic goals that were set, such as planting 30,000 acres of an urban tree canopy by 2025. Just to be clear, the other 6 Bay states only plan on planting cumulatively 6,000. The reality, of course, is that our forestry staff has informed me that this goal isn't feasible, and in fact, there had been no previous focus on attaining it. See, goals are important to me. I think when we set goals, we go to work to hit them. And I believe that the Chesapeake Bay deserves for these goals to be obtained. The reality, of course, is that the previous administration wasn't completely transparent on how they were setting forth their agenda. And in fact, had 2030 as the ultimate timeline, and funding streams as a result were insufficient in order to meet the 2025 goals by the time that they were set to be met. That resulted in budgeting $50 to $80 million a year, which was insufficient. I'm pleased to say that this past year, with an effort that was bipartisan in nature, I had the great privilege of signing a budget that increased our funding 75% in Virginia, adding nearly $60 million to our 2023 timeline and investment, and another $10 million on top of that in 2024. This is still insufficient, but we are committed to working towards meeting the goals. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll get there by 2025. We have made sufficient progress. Sufficient progress for nitrogen and phosphorus reductions. And in fact, that progress has us near the goal. But unfortunately, over the last 10 years, it's been flatlined. And we have to make this last big push in order to meet the goal. Part of this can be addressed by ensuring that the projects and practices of our farmers are given full credit. Projects and practices that, in fact, are still contributing to meeting our 2025 goals, but based on the scoring mechanic aren't included. And I think that's one thing that we collectively agree, that if we're still making progress, let's acknowledge it. But I also believe that setting artificial expiration dates on good projects really doesn't take into account the great work that has been done for so many years consistently to hit these goals. Finally, the focus of our efforts on the Bay need to include, yes, modeling, but we also need to include, as we've just heard, a significant assessment of what real monitoring measures. And then we can inform our modeling to see that we are targeting exactly where incremental spending should go. I think this is a great aspiration that is not refuted or disputed, but it's going to take collective effort. Let me be clear. We have an extraordinary commitment to the Chesapeake Bay. As I said, I love the Bay, and I want others to have a chance to, in fact, love it just as I do. You know, there's a moment where we need to be focused on hitting our goals and collectively assuring that we will hit them. And that moment's now. And therefore, you have our commitment from the Commonwealth of Virginia to work towards that. It's not a matter of hitting them, but we have to be realistic as to when. Let me conclude with a deep word of thanks to all of you. Thank you for loving the Bay. Thank you for loving the rivers and the streams and the tributaries that lead to it. Thank you for loving the watershed. And thank you for cherishing this most unique asset, this most unique God-given gift. And we all have a responsibility to take care of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Youngkin. And now we'll turn it over to Chair Elfrith, who will introduce the 2023 EC Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Regan, and thank you, Governor Youngkin, Governor Hogan. And thank you to the EPA staff for your hospitality today. And lastly, thank you to all the advocates, the tireless volunteers, the tireless and impassioned folks in this room who spend every single day on this work. I have the privilege of representing many of you, including Ann and including the governor for the next 100 or so days, as I serve the city of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County. But I serve as the chair of the Chesapeake Bay Commission this year, so I'm here representing the legislatures of Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia. And while I am biased, I do believe that legislators have a different perspective on some of these problems. And we've also been integral in the work of legislating solutions and budgeting solutions to restore and protect, as the governor said, our greatest natural resource. So I wanted to highlight a few of our legislative and budget successes across our 3 states that are members of the Bay Commission. I can't overstate what a banner year it was in Pennsylvania, and I'd like to thank the Secretary for her commitment and her work on that, and Governor Wolf's as well. Just to highlight a few things, after many years, the legislature passed the Clean Streams Fund, which provides $220 million in targeted solutions to achieve our clean water goals. That includes $154 million for a new agricultural conservation assistance program, providing cost share to farmers and to implement BMPs. $22 million for a new clean water procurement program, a pay-for-success approach to achieve nutrient and sediment reduction, and $22 million to support technical assistance for nutrient management planning, something that the entire Executive Council agrees we need to focus our energy on moving forward. And since the release of our policy report in 2017, the Commission has doubled down on championing the need for enhanced capacity for ag technical assistance. Another, as Ann said, room for growth for all of our states. And finally, after a long dialogue, I believe it is around 15 years, the Pennsylvania legislature finally passed a bill to provide a statewide standard for the application of fertilizer to turf. It's huge. I cannot overstate that. This is remarkable bipartisan work on behalf of the Commonwealth, but I have to say it was driven by the members, the Pennsylvania delegation of the Chesapeake Bay Commission. I'd like to thank Governor Wolf, the Secretary, and Speaker Brian Cutler, who was also integral to this success. In Virginia, our members were equally active, and some of the successes this legislative session include the creation of the Resilient Virginia Revolving Loan Fund to help local governments finance projects and provides $25 million in seed funding to see those projects through. The establishment of guidelines for the Virginia Flood Protection Master Plan, and the clarifying and enhancing the role of the Chief Resilience Officer, a wonderful idea, Governor, that Maryland thought so highly of, we stole it for ourselves. Budget highlights also include $257 million for the state's Ag Cost Share Program and 2 new positions to support environmental literacy efforts. I'd like to thank the governor and, again, the Virginia delegation of the Bay Commission for being leaders on all of these efforts. And lastly, in Maryland, we had one of our best sessions yet. We passed the Climate Solutions Now Act of 2022, which sets new goals and targets and tools and funding to achieve significant reductions in our greenhouse gas emissions. My vice chair and the commission, Delegate Sarah Love, and I sponsored legislation to ultimately prohibit the use of PFAS containing food packaging, carpets, and firefighting foam, again contributing to the health of our waters and also the health of our first responders. A Conservation Finance Act, as the governor mentioned before, and I'd like to thank him for his leadership on that, provides new tools and incentives for private finance and environmental projects. We loved Virginia's idea so much that we stole it and created our own Office of Resilience to provide a state-level perspective and coordination effort on behalf of our bay-fronted communities. And we also doubled down on our efforts on oyster restoration, providing funding for continuing to restore the population and enhance shell and spat capacity. I'd like to thank Madam Secretary and Governor Hogan for your leadership and partnership with the legislature on all of those initiatives. But despite all of these legislative accomplishments, we are here today because there is so much more work ahead. We were effective in advocating for a new funding stream from the USDA, and at our May meeting, they announced the new Chesapeake States Partnership Initiative, or CSPI, and provided an additional $22.5 million for USDA Farm Bill programs. But our goal is to achieve additive funding, and we will continue to strive towards a $74 million annual appropriation for CSPI. The recently passed Inflation Reduction Act, on which the commission members pushed very hard, can help to make this happen. The efforts will begin with farmers in our watershed, and we are continuing our work to ensure that the next federal farm bill takes care of the Bay's farmers. We hope that partnership, and that's the word of the day, continues on not just the farm bill, not just CSPI, but also, as Ann and Dr. Boyd mentioned, on restoring our critical habitat for blue crabs and blue crab populations across the Bay. I'll point out the obvious. I was not yet born when the agreement was first signed. But I have tremendous optimism that together, because of these partnerships, we can actually achieve our goals in the long run. And here are just a few reasons I am optimistic. The citizen engagement, and all of you being here today, spending your Tuesday with us, shows that. We have better, more targeted science, as been highlighted. We can actually see in our most effective basins where we should be targeting our resources for the greatest goals. We have a once-in-a-generation funding opportunity, thanks to the Biden administration, that we should take advantage of. We have an impassioned EPA and EPA staff pushing this forward. And lastly, as a member of the Chesapeake Bay Commission, I commit to you that you have a group of bipartisan, solutions-oriented legislators in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia, ready and willing to continue this work with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair Elfrith, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. I want to especially thank the governors, our state secretaries and state leaders, and all of the staff that have supported these efforts. We're honored to carry through and push forward this important work for the 64,000 square mile watershed and for the 18 million people who call it home. We are a strong partnership, and we will continue our partnership and our collaboration at the federal, state, and local levels. Let's be clear, we're stronger together. And I look forward to continuing this journey with each of you as we rethink our path forward and take the necessary steps, both big and small, for the future of the Chesapeake Bay program. And with that, I think we'll open it up to press for a few questions that will be facilitated by our comms director, CBP comms director, Rachel Felver.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Administrator Regan. So we are running a little bit late today, but we do want to take a few questions. Start in the back, your name and your affiliation, please.
Okay, thank you. All right, that's better. Okay, I wanted to address the commission, but more specifically, Administrator Regan, congratulations on your appointment. I guess my question would be, there are two sides to this story. I've been covering both sides, the meetings and the management, but You know, you've got the rural populations of Chesapeake Bay. I'm a little less familiar with the Pennsylvania part of it, but with Maryland and Virginia, I've done a lot of filming, and there's a lot of unhappiness, I guess, with the condition of the bay and the water quality and a lot of different factors and how it's been managed. And particularly with the watermen and the seafood industry and family farmers in places such as the Eastern Shore, the Northern Neck, et cetera, their communities and their industries are in a state of decline. And in many places, there are only a couple people left, you know, really working what had been traditional communities around the bay, and that are a food source of wild, with the seafood industry, organic food that is of the highest quality of food that you can really get. And I've spoken about places, I'm a Washington native, the Main Avenue Market, Lexington Market, there's such a thing as food deserts, where minority communities and underserved communities don't have access to a lot of healthy food. Say Safeway in Anacostia, I know because of friends, people I've worked with, you know, they would have to shop uptown where they work before going down there. But the local seafood industry, you know, has provided a very healthy, wild, and sustainable food source, given that the shipping is very localized. And many of these communities are derived from native tribes that have inhabited these lands forever. And there are historical African American rural communities in places like Reedville, Virginia. So I guess my question would be, you know, and a lot of them point to wastewater treatment and Conowingo Dam and other specific issues as the problems that need to be addressed in the Bay. I guess my question would be, the Chesapeake Commission, initially I understand, was started along with the Maryland Watermen's Association. Larry Semmes, who's now deceased for some years, was, I understand from Ann's speeches, was one of the founding members, and they really no longer have a seat at the table. I wonder if you might look at bringing the watermen and the traditional communities of the Bay that are sort of suffering economically. They're suffering from opioid problems and losing their land and their communities. And they're also sort of the eyes and ears of the Bay, and they have hundreds of years of knowledge. So I won't go on any further, but I guess my question would be, will there be any attempt to sort of take a fresh look at some of those perspectives going forward, and maybe how could some of those issues be resolved and addressed, and perhaps if there's a way to find some common ground going forward?
Well, I appreciate that question, and let me just say that I agree wholeheartedly with Ann's presentation, which is we have made progress. While we have made progress, we have a long way to go. You know, while I'm chair, let me just start by saying all of our stakeholders will have a seat at the table. We need for everyone to have a seat at the table, especially those who have a vested interest, because our solutions needs to meet the needs of everyone. I'm optimistic. You know, there's just absolutely no reason to point fingers and look backwards. What we're doing is we're bringing the full breadth of government to the table. State, local, and federal government. We're putting the best minds on this issue. We're looking at a level of cooperative federalism and a cooperative local government in a way that is a fresh look. It's a forward-leaning look. Yes, we're going to do some refining. We're going to do some retooling. But at the end of the day, we just had an awesome conversation over lunch. Everyone at this table is committed to the Chesapeake Bay. And we're going to put all of our resources, our efforts, and our intellectual capacity into solving this problem. We're not going to kick the can down the road. We're not going to look beyond 2025. We're starting with tomorrow and where we need to go from tomorrow henceforth. So at the end of the day, we're going to put our shoulder to the wheel. We're ready to push forward, and every single stakeholder will have a seat at the table.
Thank you. Next. Ma'am.
Hello, Annie Snyder with Politico here. I have a two-pronged question for you. The first is for Administrator Regan and for the two governors here. I'm hearing a recognition that the near-term goals, the 2025 deadline, is not going to be met. We have seen a history in the Bay of ambitious goals being set with deadlines where the person who signed the initial agreement is no longer in office. I suspect, Governor Hogan, you might not be there for whatever this future deadline is, but Governor Youngkin, Administrator Regan, is there a chance that we see a deadline in which one of you, both of you, might still be in the positions that you're in when that deadline comes to pass? And then secondarily, for Administrator Regan, you have a decision pending before you with respect to Pennsylvania's Phase 3 whip. I'm wondering where that decision stands, whether to approve it or not. We just heard from Ann Swanson the importance of animal feeding operations in meeting the water quality goals in the Bay. Would increased scrutiny of those operations be something you might consider as you're deciding whether or not to sign off on Pennsylvania's whip?
Do you want to?
My part's easy. I, unlike many governors, have a one-term, 4-year limit. And therefore, what I am committed to do is during this time period to have the full emphasis from our administration and all partners in order to progress towards those 2025 goals and hopefully meet them, recognizing that as I see it today, meeting them all by 2025 is a real stretch. Some of them we will meet, and that's my commitment, is that we will continue to work aggressively towards meeting those goals, recognizing that 2025 is a time frame that for all of them, I don't see us making.
I'd like to echo that. I think that we shouldn't lose sight that, number one, the group of members here represent a lot of intellectual capacity. I think about Secretary Garvin here, who not only is the Secretary of Delaware, but he was at EPA in the regional administration position prior to. And as he said earlier, his name is on many of the documents, and he's still here fighting. We've got a former administrator who is advising Governor Youngkin, who's carrying over some of that intellectual capacity. I'm committed, this team is committed. And so while it may appear that people have come and gone, the reality is that a lot of people have been building on the 34 years of work that Ann's been doing, and we're gonna keep that continuity going. I think it's important for me to stress that the members of this committee have been and remain committed to hitting these targets. We did have an honest conversation over lunch today, which is how do we refine our goals so that we ensure that they are achievable? The achievability of any implementation plan that we put in place is top of mind for every single one of us here. As it goes for the second question, listen, all options are on the table. I think that we all will collectively look at using every tool in our toolbox to ensure that we hit the goals of the Chesapeake Bay Council, but also our respective goals that we are statutorily or legally bound to as state regulators and federal regulators. And so the goal here is to think about how we leverage all of our tools and how we look at both regulatory and voluntary measures to achieve what we all want to achieve, which is protecting and preserving this natural resource.
And we just have time for one more question. It's going to be one from online. This is from Christine Condon with the Baltimore Sun. Is the council asking the principals to reconsider the 2025 timeline at this time? Groups like the Chesapeake Bay Foundation have called on the council to acknowledge that the states are lagging behind and to reevaluate. Is the council doing so?
Well, I think we've all acknowledged that 2025 is fleeting in terms of achieving our goal. And so what we've tasked our staff to do is take a look at what can we achieve between now and 2025, and what do we need to do to get back on track. I can't stress enough the lunch we just had, and the members at this table and our staffs are fully committed to protecting and preserving this national treasure. We understand what's at stake. We understand who relies on it and for what reasons they rely on it. Economic prosperity, sustenance, cultural relevance, and just the beauty of the Bay. And so there's a strong commitment here from all of us, and we intend to set realistic, achievable goals on a timeline that accomplishes the ambitious goals that we all share.
All All right, thank you very much. And for folks that did ask questions on Zoom, we are collecting them and we'll be responding to you within the next 24 hours. And thank you, everybody, and I'll turn it back to you, Administrator Regan.
Well, thank you. And again, I want to thank everybody for joining. We had an excellent conversation over lunch. We just had an excellent presentation from a number of very committed individuals. This is something that obviously cuts across state lines, party lines, and it's just something that is very interesting to all of us, and we are committed to solving this issue together. So thanks everyone for joining us, and meeting adjourned.